Hello and welcome to Sarastro's Painting. In this video I'll be painting the B1 Battle Droids from Atomic Mass Games' Star Wars Shatterpoint. Here's a quick summary of my approach. Assembly of the droids was fairly straightforward. I'd only stress that it's worth letting the body and arms dry completely before attaching the legs. As usual, I've primed the miniatures in black, followed with some grey and white zenithal highlights as detailed in episode 1. This provides a pattern of light and shade that will synergise nicely with the speed paints I'll be using, but a plain prime in white would also be fine. I'll then provide the base colours, and a couple of different speed paints is all we need here. I think I actually spent longer painting the bases than I did the actual droids. If you'd like to take things further, I'll then be exploring a range of optional finishing touches, including the red markings found on the security battle droids, along with various touches of battle damage and weathering. Let's jump in with the base colours. I'm going to begin by painting the droids using the Skeleton Horde contrast colour. This is one of the lighter, more translucent paints in the range, making it ideal for capturing the look we're after. You can see I'm initially covering the entire figure apart from the weapon. I'm working quite quickly because once I've achieved full coverage, I'd like to take a minute to soak up some of the paint from the flatter and more upturned areas, leaving a lighter highlight tone. It's useful to have a bit of paper towel nearby whilst doing this. If you want to give yourself a bit more time, you could also just paint half of each droid first, then soak up the excess paint before moving on to the rest. Next I'm using a roughly equal mix of black Templar and Basilicanum Grey for the blasters. The reason I'm mixing in the Basilicanum Grey is because it's quite a bit thinner than the black Templar, which I find to be just a little too heavy and opaque on its own. I'm now painting the first base, where I'm using orange leather for the main colour, and brown leather for the cracks and recesses. I'm then mixing in some Iroko to provide some dry brushing and edge highlights. Painting the bases on their own first is also an option here, of course. You could also break things up a bit by painting the flat rocks in grey if you like, as you can see in this example. For the second base, I'm using graphite for the main colour, with some black or dark grey for the recesses, as well as the little scratches on the surface. I've now mixed some white sands into the grey, which I'm using once again to do some dry brushing and provide some edge highlights. This next bit is very optional, but here I've decided to mix some Cantabric Blue along with a little black into the graphite to create a blue tinted shadow tone. I'm really just trying to create a little more tonal variation here to add interest, so I'm playing around a bit with some gentle gradients. I might use a damp brush to help create some soft transitions here. I'm now further sharpening the edges with some additional white sands in the mix. And here I'm also using some thinned orange leather to complement the blue tones introduced earlier. I'm just kind of pushing this into the opposite sides of each panel to where I placed the more bluish tones earlier. And I'm now just playing around with the various elements until I'm happy with the overall look, and I've gone quite close to pure white sands for some of these edge highlights. Apart from painting the rims of the bases, these droids are absolutely good enough to game with. Let's now take a look at some optional finishing touches. To add some visual interest, I've chosen to add the red markings found on the security B1 Battle Droids. For that, I'm starting with a base coat of deep red, followed with a mid-tone using the more orangey Aldebaran Red, before mixing in some light skin to provide a few edge highlights. So this is the deep red. I'm now using the Aldebaran Red for the mid-tone, leaving some dark lining between the little sections. And I'm now mixing in some light skin to provide a few highlights. This is yet another place you might like to stop and call the droids done. I'm going to add some additional weathering, however. I'm starting with kind of an oily looking mix of Aggaros Dunes and Basilicanum Grey, which I'm using just to boost the depth in some of the joints and recesses. Next I'm adding some general bits of battle damage and chipping, and any shade of black or off black can be used for this. We can also use a bluish off-white, here I'm using Artic Blue mixed with white, to create the impression of bits of exposed metalwork. This works nicely when placed in or around the patches of dark chipping we added a moment ago. You could also use a mix of metallic silver and white here instead if you like. And we can use pretty much any light beige or ivory tone to provide a few general edge highlights. This is Mojave White. I like to keep the paint pretty opaque for this kind of work, and you can see me using the side of the brush tip to easily hit these edges. I'm now continuing to use these various elements on the rest of the droids. This is also a handy way to obscure any parts of the model which might have become a little roughed up by any bits of stray glue during the assembly stage. I'm also adding a few glinting highlights to the blasters using the bluish off-white we mixed earlier. I'm now painting the rims of the bases in black, followed with a few final highlights for the base. this completes the B1 Battle Droids. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about the painting process, do feel free to leave them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to help out. And as always, you can find full product details in the video description. Join me again soon as we continue painting miniatures from Star Wars Shatterpoint. Happy painting!